used to teach too.
Yeah, oh, I got that in the preamble. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. So, introductions. My name is John Beckman, Professor John Beckman, Dr. John Beckman. We're coming to you live from Southern Command with half my brain tied behind my back. We're doing technical discussions. This is number 011. We're going to talk about the deep state. So I have with us Ivan Raiklin. Okay, so I'll give a brief introduction to Ivan Raiklin. He is the Secretary of Retribution, the Deep State Marauder, former Green Beret, Lieutenant Colonel, Associate of the great General Flynn, speaks 5 languages, including Russian and Ukrainian. Attorney at law with a focus in constitutional law, professor of intelligence analysis with about 4 years of teaching for the FBI, CIA, and defense academies. He focused on countering MS-13 and ISIS, was a tech scout for the Army. The man who proposed the legal idea that the Vice President Mike Pence had the legal, ethical, and moral authority to not certify the 2020 election based on rampant fraud and fraudulent electors within the Electoral College.
You want me to wait for you to finish to correct some stuff, or should I jump in?
Wait till the end to correct it. Was retweeted by President Trump. He was a guest on Tucker, Alex Jones, Hodge Twins shows, amongst others. Host of the Raiklin Report every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. The MAGA of the MAGA, the ice pick who will castrate the deep state. Okay, is there anything you want to clarify?
There you go. So, I mean, it's pretty accurate mostly, but just I want to make sure that first off, I'm retired, right? I'm a retired lieutenant colonel.
Right.
The other thing is I did teach for almost 4 years at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Some of my students are members of the IC, to include FBI, CIA, potentially, and other components of the Department of Defense. So I didn't teach at the FBI or CIA academies, just for point of clarification.
Okay, but some students.
As far as the authority to not certify is not an accurate depiction. The more exact term would be, I wrote a tweet that had a memo attached to it that President Trump retweeted, and it laid out how Vice President Pence could guarantee how he could follow the Constitution and defend the Constitution and follow the Electoral Count Act on December of 2020. And then I later recommended a strategy on January 6th to his chief of staff and Kevin McCarthy. Those are 2 disparate kind of theories. I didn't tell him to not certify. I told him in that tweet that he needs to send back to the states under the Electoral Count Act in December. But by January 6th, since the states had literally violated all norms, principles in 39 states, the election, then it was up to him to wait on Kevin McCarthy to vote by state delegation on the objections. And had Kevin McCarthy ran that particular play, then it would have been up to Mike Pence to decide whether he would accept Nancy Pelosi's 1 House member, 1 vote option, or Kevin McCarthy's 1 state, 1 vote option in the House on the electors from the 6 contested states. Okay. So a little bit more nuanced. Most people try to circumvent the nuance and try to label me as, the biggest villain in the history of humanity. But when you go into the nuance and detail, it debunks them and it actually exposes them. And then it creates criminal risk for all of them as part of the treasonous actors on my deep state target list.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So
of which now at this point, Mike Pence is one of those members.
Okay. So I did not mean to pigeonhole you in the wrong thing. It's just that I'm not a legal authority. Whereas
that's fine.
You are a legal authority.
You're operating in good faith, what I'm seeing right now. Yes. So I'm going to clarify politely as we move forward.
Perfect. Okay, so let me also just give some historical context for this conversation. So this is, and I remember following this. I remember these events because I followed the first Trump presidency very closely. So Trump and Flynn were spied on by the United States government. So that's the Crossfire Hurricane, where what they would do is they would monitor conversations of people who talk to foreigners, namely Russians, and then they could demask these people and they could spy on American citizens through these programs. This was the FBI under Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and Joseph Pientka III.
There you go.
Yep, these are Obama holdovers during the transition period. Okay, and then later Pientka III goes to the FBI to seemingly coordinate government spying and censorship on Twitter. And if you want references for these, you can see these in the Flynn documentary, and I also have a link to a video where you describe these things. Are those correct?
Let me get a little bit more exact than that. So,
okay.
The way that the spying operation within the FBI works, it's kind of multi-pronged, but it starts off with an FBI agent. They basically, or let's just say it this way. They first create public facing information known as the fake Russia hoax in a mainstream publication, such as New Woke Slimes or the Washington Compost are the two primary originators for that. Sometimes you use international assets such as Reuters in London, right? And again, some people pronounce it differently. I pronounce it Reuters in London, right, etc. So they create that fake information that you're just highlighting right there. And then that is then leveraging the court of public opinion to then demand something be done by law enforcement entities. It's they themselves, like Andy McCabe, seeds the BS so that then the public outcry then goes back to an Andy McCabe and Jim Comey to do something about it. Meanwhile, it's bogus predicate. That then creates the predicate to then task your subordinate agents, Peter Strzok, who then ends up being complicit, and Joe Pientka, to go ahead and start the investigation. The investigation then includes, let's take a look at the Russia collusion with the Trump campaign. Where should we start? Let's start with anybody in the orbit of President or candidate Trump at the time that has an international nexus. Look at what we have here. It's Carter Page. Let's then create a FISA warrant on Carter Page. How did they do that? They put together a documentary package known as a Woods file. So you put that package together, and then part of that Woods file, there's an email. One of the emails that was provided by Kevin Kleinsmith, an attorney. Write these names down, please. Kevin Kleinsmith, CLI, right? And so Kevin Kleinsmith reaches out to the FBI, or excuse me, CLI, and says, hey, did Carter Page, because he's doing his oil and gas deals as a private citizen, right, consultant on oil and gas in Russia, does he come back to the CIA and tell you guys about that and debriefs? The CIA counterpart says, why, yes, he does. But Kevin Kleinsmith changes that email to say, no, he does not. That falsified, manipulated email is part of the Woods file. And a second guy by the name of Brian Autten, Auten, the supervisory intelligence analyst on Crossfire Hurricane, an adjacent employee at literally the same level as Joe Pientka, right? Basically says, my assessment based on the totality of the information is that we must go ahead and push for a FISA warrant application before the FISA court. Now, things to understand in the background as they do that. You have the FISA court is appointed by every member of the FISA court is appointed by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. By 2012, Chief Justice John Roberts had already appointed all members of the 11-member United States FISA court, a known and renowned and devout appointee of George Bush, and thus a renowned and devout Trump derangement syndrome political operative known as the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So with that in background, you have Kevin Kleinsmith doctored email, you have Brian Auten's falsified analysis related to it, and then that is presented for Joe Pientka to sign off on. Best case scenario for Joe, he was duped and manipulated into it, trusted those people, and then sent it up the chain for signature by Andy McCabe and Jim Comey. And that is then presented before the FISA court judge. And oh, by the way, you think really that the FISA court judge was duped, or was the FISA court judge clamoring to receive just the minimum amount of evidence necessary for him to say, you know what? Yeah, baby, let's spy on the Trump campaign so we can neuter his ability to become the president. And if he does, we can help facilitate our beloved Mikey Pence to go ahead and be the uniparty's handler for Trump, so that all information going to him is what they want him to receive. And then all for information coming out, only the stuff that they want filtered through is going to be action by Mikey Pence and the Bush-Cheney cabal. Why do I say that? Because when you look at Mikey Pence's Wikipedia article, it says that his favorite vice president ever in the history of the United States is Dickie Boy Cheney, and probably by extension, his beloved daughter.
Okay. So wait. So let me just try to summarize
Yes.
if I'm interpreting correctly. So this is actual evidence that the United States government is corrupt in the sense that it's falsifying documents to get access to listen to people's private conversations. And this is specifically on
The Kevin Kleinsmith component that is documented. He was actually charged with the 1001 lying to the FBI. But the thing is, he was given a slap on the wrist because
I see.
I think it was Eric Holder and Jimmy and Andy McCabe or some other Jim Comey wrote an amicus brief to the judge to make sure that he wouldn't be held to account. And guess who the judge was? The same judge that went after General Flynn.
I see. Okay, so essentially, this is the main point: is there is clear evidence published in the public domain that there is clear government corruption where they're falsifying documents, and
he pled guilty.
Yes,
Kevin Kleinsmith pled guilty to that charge.
Okay, that's good, because one of my later questions is like, give me one example of like a clear crime that's been committed right here. You just did that, so I just want everybody to know, because one of the problems with the Republicans is they hear some of this stuff, but they need like the clear example. And this is one good example of clear.
Look it up. Go to Court Listener. Go to like a Pacer. Go to whatever search tool.
So I'm not doubting it. Okay. So let's see. We got a little bit more time, so I'm going to go a little bit more into some more historical.
Since we're going into this level of detail, I'm going to go ahead and play a rerun on my show so we can go into as much depth as you have time for.
Okay, that's good for me. Okay, okay, that's great. So
because you're an educated interviewer, so I want to give you the
I do have a PhD. That's correct.
So let me send a note and say rerun, please. Okay, we're clear.
Okay. This is great. Thank you very much for the extension of time. Okay, so let me give a little bit more historical context. After all this stuff happened with General Flynn and Trump,
wait. Since we have the time, let's back up a little bit. I want to give a little bit more historical context.
Okay.
You got to remember. So this is how the FBI, like the leadership and the task organization wire diagram, if you will, of the FBI. So you had the director, Jim Comey. You had the deputy director, Andy McCabe.
Okay.
Jim Comey's general counsel, meaning the senior lawyer at the FBI, was a guy by the name of Jim Baker. So Jim Comey, Jim Baker. I would kind of associate those two together if you want to do that. And then the next line, the association between Andy McCabe and Andy McCabe's senior counsel, his lawyer as the deputy director, is a gal by the name of Lisa Page.
And is this the girl that they were texting, having like some kind of an affair? I remember that.
Yes. So Lisa Page was communicating and texting with her friend Pete Strzok.
Oh, okay.
So make that connection. Link analysis I see you're doing on the screen. I'm glad we're discussing this live and you're taking notes. This is fantastic. And the viewers are going to see this, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm recording all this.
This is I think we're going to have multiple versions of this if you allow me, because you have a capability that I haven't seen anybody else have with this speed to be able to capture as I communicate this.
Perfect. Okay. So these people are talking to each other via text.
Okay. So
wait, texting or sexting?
Well, there's a lot of information out there that discusses both. Okay. I'm only focused in on treason. Okay. A lot of people talk about different levels of, transgressions, child sex trafficking, all this other stuff. That's for other people to work on.
Right.
I'm focused on this. Okay?
Capital T, treason. Got it.
Now, more people I need to include into the mix.
Okay.
So the assistant director for counterintelligence of the FBI, which would be somebody that falls under. So anytime you're running a counterintelligence operation, particularly at this level, you have to include. So you have the line agents that are involved. Okay. You have the operation that was created with the task force or whatever. And then above that, like at the end of the day, it's the head of counterintelligence. That's the senior official that then informs the deputy director and then the director, at a minimum, the director, right? At the FBI before it happens to go up the scale. So and then Jim Baker, the general counsel, is going to have to look at it to determine whether or not it feats, at a minimum, they can articulate a justifiable legal reason to allow the investigation to be predicated like started, predicated, and how in depth it can go and how it can proceed.
Okay.
So Jim Comey, Jim Baker, and then Bill Priestap, William Priestap. So it's E dot, I don't know what it stands for. William Priestap. Now, if you take a look, he's one of the witnesses in the Sussman trial. Okay.
Okay.
This is all interrelated, man. When you dig down deep, it's like, oh my God, this all makes sense now. Well, I'm here to make it make sense. Okay.
Okay, good.
But it takes a minute to lay out all of the players so that you understand.
Yeah.
Next, we have who else? So Bill Priestap, according to the notes that were disclosed based on discovery of Sidney Powell when she took over the case for General Flynn, in Bill Priestap's notes, he says, are we to get Flynn fired or to get him to lie? Like, what is the intent of our op?
Okay, so wait, so there's actual documents, government documents, where he takes notes and he says
it's Bill Priestap's not text. It's not written. It's written, handwritten notes. Is our goal to get him to lie or to get him fired? That's almost a direct quote. And if you want to search it up, you'll get the exact quote with the exact actual screenshot of notes saying that. Okay.
So these are FBI handwritten notes that are actually documenting their intention to try to destroy General Flynn. Right.
So I want to pause here and kind of do a little banter with you and ask you, as a critical thinker, you had PhD, you go through the hypotheses, right? The analytic process. I did it, done it, taught it. You probably went through the same thing from a civilian perspective. So then let's parse this out. Who is our, when it says is our goal, who does our represent?
My guess would be it's the FBI. It's the people above him who are essentially he's trying to communicate with to get permission, right?
Exactly, because that's who he reports to.
So that's
and he's
Jim
asking
Baker.
The question.
So that's Jim Baker.
Then who does Jim Comey report to get necessary top cover to continue this operation beyond January 20th of 2017,
so
when
in this case,
it's no longer Barry Hussein?
Oh, I was going to say, I thought it was going to be Obama, because this was before the transition, right?
Yeah, but how does it continue after the transition?
That's a good question, because I guess my guess would be that, so again, guess as a civilian, I don't know, but my guess would be that Obama could somehow certify that this just continues into the next administration. How
about illegal? I present you with another fact?
Okay.
Who do you think Peter Strzok's? Well, let's take a look. Crossfire Hurricane involved Peter Strzok and one of his agents that was called in, Joseph Pientka III.
Okay. And so this is the other. So we're already. Let me just to clarify. There's actually multiple spying things going on here. There's the General Flynn spying mission, and then there is the Trump spying mission. And the Trump spying mission was the Crossfire Hurricane. Is that correct?
Well, there's more than that. There's basically three categories of spying. So there's
multiple people who they're trying to get, and there's a few different organizations who are interacting, trying to get these people. Is that correct?
So Crossfire, let's start with Crossfire Hurricane. Crossfire Hurricane had 4 different sub operations targeting an individual within the umbrella operation called Crossfire Hurricane.
Okay.
One of them was the spying operation on Carter Page.
Okay, Carter Page. I remember that, but I just remember as a civilian thinking like, oh, I don't know who that guy is, but he was somebody who interacted with Russia.
Carter Page legitimately interacted with Russia, and then above board by the book was debriefed by America's CIA of what he was doing. So he was reporting back.
Yeah.
In the interest of you, like he's a former U.S. naval officer. So he did everything by the book and reported back on all of his involvement related to that.
Right.
It was that Kevin Kleinsmith flipped that to then make it look like this guy was a spy. But that was the legal evidence, or the doctor manipulated evidence, that then triggered the first FISA warrant on Carter Page. And what that did was it allows what's known as 2 hops. So imagine this. I am authorized, based on the FISA, to spy on you. But then I get to look at everybody that you talk to. And how many people do you talk to in the course of a year?
Oh God, thousands.
And how many people do those people that you talk to in the collective talk to?
I mean, that's got to be then millions.
That's the level of ability when you authorize a FISA warrant. I'm able to spy on you, everyone you talk to, and then everyone they talk to.
Okay, so
Which means
that's
if they go out,
that's extremely important to reiterate because the American people don't know that. So if you get a FISA warrant on somebody, again, that's a warrant that where the government thinks they might be a spy. You're saying that they can then listen to all the conversations of that individual, let's say X1, and then they can also listen to all the conversations of all the individuals that that person talks to. Is that correct?
I like that you drew it out. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a node structure. So they get, and
That's
this
known as the two hop rule.
the two hop. Okay,
One hop from you to whoever else, and the second hop is from them to the next layer.
I see. In computer science, we call this like a node. So this is like a node structure where, yeah, okay. So this is going to give them access to listen to conversations of millions and millions of Americans that probably have no idea that they're being listened to. Is that correct?
So what I'm hearing you say is that means that they now have access and insight into all communications within the entire Trump campaign.
Probably even within the entire country. I mean, if you think about it, you could always find somebody who's talking to a foreigner. But yeah, within this FISA warrant.
And the way it was predicated was
Yeah.
based on the Kevin Kleinsmith and the illegal, right, mail.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole
and
thing
then the
is based on
Brian
that.
Autten. Remember these names because they're going to come up later. The Brian Autten supervisory intel analyst that recommended the signature that is necessary to go through the process of creating the legitimate Woods file that then is presented before the FISA court, meaning
Yeah.
the judge and the staff of that court, to then authorize the spying.
Right.
One side note, the judge has barbecues with Peter Strzok.
Okay, so the judge who looks at this FISA warrant that approves this thing has barbecues. Okay, what's the judge's name?
I think I'll have to look again, but I think it was Judge Contreras.
Okay, we'll say Judge
Rudy Contreras.
Contreras with a question mark. We think it's him.
And that was the first judge that was randomly selected to be the judge for General Flynn.
I see.
Until he was forced to be recused. And then it was placed into the hands of Judge Emmett Sullivan.
Okay.
Okay. Man, I think we're going to kill it in this interview.
Yeah.
So we have a capable interviewer. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's what. Okay. That's good. That's a good compliment because this is actually my first interview.
Number two.
Yeah. Number two.
George Papadopoulis.
Okay. I remember that name, but I don't remember what that person did.
Number three.
Okay.
General Flynn.
Yep.
Number four, Paul Manafort.
Yeah, I remember Paul Manafort. He was
now let's look at this from a political targeting perspective.
Right.
Carter Page creates our international predicate, albeit illegitimate. Another person that we have for international predicate to be able to kind of quasi fake say that there's international connections, George Papadopoulos. So he's out in London, he's out in Greece, because he's doing some advisory work too, right? As a private guy. And so they put in front of him, put in the names all next to George Papadopoulos, Stefan Halper. S-T-F-A-N.
Halper. F-A-N. Halper.
Stefan Halper.
Okay.
Okay. And then put in the name Azra Turk. A-Z-R-A-T-U-R-K.
Okay.
And when John Durham is asked by Matt Gaetz when he's testifying about Azra Turk being a honeypot and if she worked for the FBI, John Durham's like, no, Matt Gaetz. I'm here to cover up the previous cover-up. I don't know anything about Azra Turk's involvement in being a honey trap into trying to get George Papadopoulos to do or say something that could then reverse justify us spying on him. That's my interpretation. But basically, John Durham spent 3 years basically putting together about 50% of what I'm about to present to you.
So this guy, John Durham, is he in the FBI?
Department of Justice. He was
DOJ.
appointed as the special counsel
So
to look at the origins of the Crossfire Hurricane operation. Meanwhile, all he did was cover up for it.
It's okay. So he's
You heard of
covering
this
up.
name?
So what, John Durham?
Yeah.
I thought there was a no. I never heard that name.
Okay, yeah. So that's a big name in the community that like thought that he was all legit.
Or was there that, or is that like the Durham Report?
Yes,
Like,
that's the same Durham.
I vaguely recall like the Durham Report, and the only thing I recall about him was that, like, yeah, supposedly like that was a legitimate investigation. That's what we were told. But you're saying he's covering up the fact that they were the FBI.
No, he just slow. Yeah, all he did was slow roll. Remember, he was the one that prosecuted Sussman, and he was the one that prosecuted Igor Danchenko. We'll get into all these details.
Okay, so wait, let me go back to this Azra Turk to just clarify. This Azra Turk is you're saying a honeypot agent. Does she work for the CIA or the FBI?
Unclear.
We don't know, but she's some kind of a honeypot that was targeted at George Papadopoulis. And
yeah, so just so that you know, for the viewer and the listener, I have talked to. I'm going to say this probably for the first time, maybe publicly. Maybe not, but I'll say it again. Carter Page. I have communicated with Carter Page at length, extensively, to kind of make sure that my understanding and research is accurate. Right. He still has a lawsuit pending against them for violating his Fourth Amendment. It's still going through the courts. Number two, George Papadopoulos. I have communicated regularly with George Papadopoulos. And now I'm going to say publicly, because, well, I spent 2 months with him on this tour for the Flynn movie. Right. I have also communicated regularly with General Flynn.
Right.
The only person that I haven't communicated with that was one of the 4 targets of the Crossfire Hurricane op was Paul Manafort.
Right.
Now, let me so George Papadopoulos was a lower level kind of guy in the campaign.
Right.
So Carter Page, the FBI went after him through that illegal FISA. For George Papadopoulos, there was a separate op run out of the London station of the CIA. The station chief was Gina Haspel.
Oh,
Gina Haspel, as a side note, I'd put her with like Papadopoulos.
She's now the head. Is she still the head of the CIA?
He then became the lead cover-up person over at the CIA, as President Trump was duped into accepting her as the director of the CIA.
Right.
As I'm laying all this out, John, my last 4 years were teaching our U.S. intel analysts and international partners of what the American intelligence community system looks like. Mission, roles, responsibilities, leaders, and basically, in some instances, down to the level of kind of capabilities within each organization. Meaning task organization, mission, roles, responsibilities. And let's just say after 25 years in the system, I may know one or more people in each agency.
Right. So
just for context of the context.
Right. So I mean, that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I know you know.
Those are the 4 individuals that were subordinate to the Crossfire Hurricane op. The code name for the General Flynn op was called Crossfire Razor.
Crossfire Razor. Okay.
So how did they do General Flynn?
Yeah.
Well,
I remember. Let me see if I got it correctly. From what I remember.
No, it's done differently in each case.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, supposedly, we don't know. Like for Carter Page, we know publicly that there was an illegal Woods file that triggered a FISA warrant.
Right.
Now, one thing. Let me stay on Carter Page.
Okay.
The approval authority to get a FISA warrant is you start off with the FBI agent. Okay.
Right.
Joseph Pientka III. And then you work your way up to, the general counsel, the deputy director, and then the director of the FBI, Comey, right?
Right.
And then it goes before the judge.
Right.
So in this case, when you do a FISA, it only allows you to spy on an American citizen for 90 days. Okay.
I see.
And then you have to file for an approval.
Right.
Or excuse me, a renewal.
Right.
Well, when Joseph Pientka III testified in 2020 before the Senate Judiciary Committee, where good old Lindsey Graham, another cover-up crew member, was without informing Senator Grassley's office or any of the other Republicans, called in Joseph Pientka III. And during that hearing or that testimony, Joseph Pientka responds with, when he's asked, where is the original Woods file? And his attorney, because he was represented by DOJ, FBI attorneys and his personal attorneys. When that's the case, that means he's sitting on some stuff that they're trying to make sure that he doesn't accidentally disclose the complicity and the criminality of his colleagues at the FBI, but at the same time protects himself from any legal criminal exposure, right?
Right.
So he, in a very nuanced manner, is basically saying words in order to not disclose anything. What does he respond with? Are you referring to the reconstructed Woods file / FISA warrant application?
That's the one they resubmitted. So you're saying that he
when you say when I say reconstructed, to me that means there wasn't an original one that was destroyed, and covered up.
Got it.
Indirectly. So that's nowhere to be heard and seen, supposedly. Okay.
What a load of bullshit.
But we'll get to that because, well.
Okay. So just to get back on track.
We are on track. I'm still providing the baseline context that you need to be aware of.
Yes. No. Okay. So let me just try to summarize where we're at. So essentially, all the justification for Crossfire Hurricane are all fraudulent FISA warrants. And we're just about
No, there was one FISA warrant, and it was done on Carter Page. And then there were subsequent renewals, 3 renewals.
Okay.
But the 3 renewals were renewed based on the previous illegitimate predicated first one. And then that Woods file that was illegitimately predicated that Woods file was destroyed as people were starting to figure out that it was like Joseph Pientka, I think, figured out that it was like illegitimate. And that's when he decided early on in January of 2017, like, I don't want to be part of this. I'm out. But we're not there yet.
So let me ask a question. Does the original FISA warrant then justify the spying on all 4 of these people or only one of these people? Or you're saying if you get one of these people, then you can spy on them all because they're all connected?
No, because it technically only allows you to spy on Carter Page.
Okay.
But then it allows you to then do the 2-hop rule to look at other ones.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what does that 2-hop rule do? With the George Papadopoulis situation, there's no fraudulent FISA warrant that we have evidence for. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the case. I'm just saying that we don't have evidence of that.
Okay.
In the case of George Papadopoulos, now I would leave that out for Papadopoulos because that will confuse people because that's not, there's zero evidence to support that.
Okay, I'll tuck that out.
Now for Carter Page, absolutely. For George Papadopoulos' situation, that's where you have John Brennan of the CIA working with his chief of station in London, which is one of the most important stations in the world for the CIA, with Beijing and Moscow and Paris, right?
Yeah. And so John Brennan was in London with Gina Haspel.
No, John Brennan was the CIA director in DC. At Langley.
Okay.
And so remember, he has to coordinate with his station chiefs globally, right? Through a division. So European division. So Gina Haspel is there at the same time, coincidentally or not, when this whole op on George Papadopoulos takes place. And he wrote a book, Deep State Target, for details. Read his book, Deep State Target. Okay. And for Carter Page's details, read the lawsuit that he's filed against these people that violated his 4th Amendment. They're listed
Okay.
there. So the spying and the manipulation kind of monitoring of George Papadopoulos starts at the CIA level and then continues when he returns back from his trip to Greece. He is then stopped by two FBI agents in Chicago. He lands and they ask him, where's the $10,000 that you got from, I can't remember the guy's name right now, in Greece. And he's like, I don't have it. It's because George Papadopoulos gave it to his attorney or something when that was also traveling out there in Europe. And so he didn't have it with him. It was an entrapment that they were trying to do.
Okay.
And so one of the two lawyers that stopped and questioned at the airport in O'Hare, George Papadopoulos, is a dude by the name of, get this, Kevin Kleinsmith.
Okay, so that's the original guy who was involved with preparing the original fraudulent Woods file.
Yes.
Okay.
And he's now involved in perpetuating the lie via George Papadopoulos, right?
So he's involved from the FBI to try to entrap George Papadopoulos.
Yep. And so here's what they get George Papadopoulos for.
Okay.
They basically start to investigate, coerce him into saying, hey, we're going to go after you for lying to us. And if you don't, we're just going to keep prosecuting. And so George Papadopoulos ended up taking a plea saying that he lied to, and he got like, I don't know, a few months.
So essentially say like, we're going to lawfare you to death unless you comply with what we're doing.
Correct. Exactly. Okay. So that's George Papadopoulos. General Flynn's situation is unique as well. I mean, see all these different when you ask me, is there one op? No, there's like parallel ops going on here.
Happening simultaneously from different organizations, including CIA and the FBI.
Right. So back up a little bit. August of 2016 is when it was just disclosed a couple months ago through the Twitter files releases, Michael Schellenberger's most recent one from a few months back, that John Brennan basically put out a memo in August of 2016 tasking his liaison partners in Britain and Australia to go ahead and start to spy on 22 plus Americans in the Trump campaign.
Okay.
Dan Bongino might have, go to Dan Bongino, and he did a piece on this with, and I think he received the actual original stuff. I have not seen it. That goes into actually more than 22, like maybe closer to 30 individuals that were spied on. Again, John Brennan is the one doing it. Why? It's because they couldn't get the necessary lawful or quasi-lawful predicate, albeit fraudulent, via the FBI's FISA process, right? Okay. Which then, when you get a FISA, it authorizes you to work with the NSA to then, collect everything.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So since they couldn't get that, then what they did was, why don't we use our liaison partners, meaning British intelligence, Australian intelligence, Five Eyes intelligence, to go ahead and say, hey, imagine like I'm Gina Haspel and you're the head of MI6, John. And I say, hey, I can't spy on the following 22 American citizens because that's just the law in America. But these are the names of the people that I can't spy on.
Right. So if
wink,
they can't, if they can't do it legally within the United States, they ask other ally spy agencies to spy on Americans.
It probably in order to CYA, it probably sounded something like this. These are the names of the people that I can't spy on, friend.
Yeah. Okay.
Use your imagination and use your creative thinking skills.
Right.
Okay. And then once they find some foreign influence and nexus, then it triggers the predicate that now can be utilized.
So did they somehow associate General Flynn with this Russian diplomat? Is that how that happened?
Now, just like, you're a perfect segue in the question. That's where I'm getting to. Okay. So just like Carter Page was legitimately reporting back above board by the book, General Flynn received, after he retires, he goes to a speaker's bureau, just like almost every other retired general goes to a speaker's bureau and says, hey, my subject matter expertise is in these categories of things. Please help me and be the middle person to find speaking gigs for me to do to get compensated for my subject matter expertise on the global stage. Okay.
Right.
So one of those that they find is, hey, RT, Russia Today, is doing a 10-year anniversary in Moscow, and they want you to speak about global security.
Right.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So he goes and briefs the Defense Intelligence Agency that he is about to do this. Above board, by the book.
So he tells, when you say the intelligence agency, is that the CIA or?
No, his former agency that he was the director of.
Oh,
the DIA,
DIA,
the Defense
okay.
Intelligence Agency.
Sorry,
right?
There's so many of these that.
Yeah, there's 17 of them plus the DNI. No big whoop.
But essentially, he's publicly saying, like, I'm going to go speak about this. So
not publicly. Secret. Well, publicly it's, hey, I'm doing this. But then later it comes out, because that interaction that he had with the Defense Intelligence Agency would have been probably an NDA or kind of a classified conversation, right?
Right.
As well as the debrief. But it wasn't until later, through legal disclosures, that it became public, declassified, that then could be talked about.
Right.
But anyway, he tells the DIA, goes and travels to Russia with his son, Michael Flynn Jr., attends that. And then at the same table, all of a sudden, President of Russia walks in and sits next to General Flynn. Who else is sitting at that table?
His son?
Jill Stein, who was a presidential candidate for the Green Party in the 2016 election cycle. But you never hear anything about that. But there's a photo of that. And the photo that's used is taken by the, the Russian press office, Peskov's office, who's the Russian spokesperson for president's spokesperson.
Okay.
Okay. So he does his thing. They basically are in physical proximity for the whole room to hear and see for whatever it was, 10, 15 minutes. And then he comes back and then debriefs with the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Right.
But what happens in the court of public opinion?
He was pegged as a spy. That's what they said about him.
Yeah, they basically used every name in the book. This is the worst person ever in the history of humanity. Never before has the human race experienced such a traitor.
Yeah.
Is the autofill on CompuSearch, right?
It was bullshit.
So, with General Flynn, since they can't get anything on him because everything's above board, and he represents the biggest existential threat to those running the Crossfire Hurricane op, because he's the only one in the Trump orbit that knows the system and can peel the onion back to down to the pixel level individual on who did what and how it was illegal. They have to deploy everything in their arsenal to take him out, which includes what? Enter in one of my categories of the deep state target list.
Okay.
The 39 individuals.
Okay.
Of the senior most national security and officials within the U.S. government that illegally unmasked General Flynn.
Yeah, I remember this.
Let's go through some of those names.
Just for context, tell me if I'm correct, that under the FISA warrant, you're not supposed to know who the actual person is. It's supposed to be censored. But then if you unmask them, you find out who they are. Is that correct?
No. You're confusing two different authorities within the government to be able to kind of function to spy on someone.
Okay.
So one is under the FISA process, as we laid out with Carter Page. So Carter Page, the target is not supposed to know that the government is spying on them, but the government knows who they're spying on, obviously, right?
Right.
So which begs the question, was George Papadopoulos under a FISA? We don't have evidence of that. Was General Flynn under a FISA? We don't have evidence of that. Is it likely? It'll be interesting to once we, probably the case. I would say we don't have evidence that occurred.
So let me ask the question: if there was not a FISA warrant, would it be completely, totally illegal for them to spy on George Papadopoulos and General Flynn, or are they are they under the FISA jurisdiction of the original Carter Page one? Because Carter Page might talk to George Papadopoulos and Flynn.
No, so the breach of the campaign starts with Carter Page.
Yeah.
Through illegitimate reason, right? But
right.
Assuming it was legitimate, then that's how they opened up the door. But it's not to say that, especially for George Papadopoulos, a lot of these things are going kind of simultaneously.
So they
with
might
General
have
Flynn,
yeah.
With let me contextualize General Flynn's situation.
Yep.
He was twice appointed by Barry Hussein as the Assistant Director for National Intelligence for Partner Engagements. Right. That role meant that he coordinated on behalf of the entire intel community for Clapper, the DNI at the time, engagement and interaction and synchronization efforts and coordination efforts with local, county, state, tribal, federal, interagency, and global. His portfolio in that position, the first one of its kind at the time, was the biggest of anybody else's. His level of context and knowledge of the entire intel and national security system is unmatched by anyone, former or current, in any administration.
Right.
And then he gets appointed as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is arguably maybe the largest intel agency on the planet. Okay. Right. And the funding that it has to supervise, et cetera.
Right.
So that's someone that was appointed by Barry Hussein, right?
Right.
So he knows the system. And then in 2014, when he's the director, and I'm a low, mid-level analyst, if you will, in the system, I observed that Barry Hussein resigns him after General Flynn speaks truth to power during testimony, saying that, yeah, ISIS ain't no JV team, and that little old, whatchamacallit, Iran deal ain't so good. Okay.
Right. So he was resigned for saying ISIS was the JV team.
No, for saying ISIS was not a JV team.
ISIS was not. I remember Obama said
because that's what Barry Hussein was saying.
Right. I remember that.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's who the Barry Hussein administration resigns. And then in 2015, General Flynn becomes the only person in the Trump orbit at the very early stages to say, hey, I would like to advise you. And then, so this is a guy that knows the keys to the kingdom and knows the system. And so he's a threat because he's got insider baseball. So General Flynn, we don't find out until Kash Patel, with Rick Grinnell as acting director of national intelligence for literally a few weeks, declassifies. Is my camera going in and out?
Yeah, it is.
So I don't know what's going on, but can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Interesting.
Yeah, it might be a cyber attack. No kidding.
So in the interest of stability, so that's not.
But I can hear you okay. Nothing with the mic went bad.
There
we go.
I'm going to change cameras.
There we go.
So Rick Grinnell, when he was the acting director of national intelligence, and Kash Patel, his deputy, declassified the names of the individuals that illegally unmasked General Flynn. 39 of them. One of those names is the last name on the list was the failed vice president. Wait for it. Joseph Biden.
Joe Biden.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another name to highlight on that list that we need to kind of store in our memory is a gal from the Treasury Department known as Sarah Raskin. Raskin.
Okay.
And she needs to be, confused with her husband, Jamie Raskin, congressman from Maryland, who led the impeachment hoax 2 as the lead impeachment manager.
So she's married.
Who last week said he's setting up civil war conditions in the event Trump wins.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
And he said that he's going to file 14th Amendment Section 3 article that he's drafted should Trump win, so that Trump cannot be seated on January 20th of 2025. Should the Democrats win the House?
So can I ask a question about
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm just trying to understand. So the 39 individuals, are they required to give permission to do the unmasking, or like why are there 39 individuals associated with the act of unmasking?
Yeah, so purportedly, there's a legal framework that allows for senior national security executives to take a look at a piece of raw intel, meaning communications with the Russian ambassador between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador, as General Flynn is trying to prepare to enter in as the national security advisor. Yes, after the election and before the inauguration, right?
Right, during the transition.
But these guys are trying to do everything in their power to stop General Flynn. So their first thing that they do is through the unmasking to see if they can find out if they can go after him and take him out. Okay?
Right.
So they listen in, they get the transcripts, and while this is going on with the unmasking illegally, you have the Crossfire Hurricane op. Remember, the unmasking is primarily at the National Security Council level and the White House level and senior cabinet level officials. So it's somewhat outside of the Crossfire Hurricane op, okay, which is also looking into Flynn. Okay. Right. So what happens? Joseph Pientka and those that are doing the Crossfire Razor operation on General Flynn on January 4th recommend closing the original counterintelligence investigation on General Flynn. And here's a little background on that. Joseph Pientka III in August of 2016 by McCabe and Comey is sent to do a counterintelligence defensive briefing of candidate Trump, Chris Christie, and General Flynn. That was the purpose publicly or disclosed to those three individuals. But the secondary purpose of Joe Pientka being deployed was to observe the mannerisms in which General Flynn and others responded when he mentioned Russia, Russia, Russia. Okay. And then report back. If you want the notes, the exact notes of Joseph Pientka III, that can be found online.
Okay.
Okay. He writes the notes of what his recollection was in that meeting, August of 2016. Okay. So fast forward, the lower mid-level employees of the FBI recommend closing Crossfire Razor on January 4th and on January 5th. What does Barry Hussein, Joe Biden, Sally Yates, Jim Comey, Valerie Jarrett, let's see who else, and some other players, they're listed on the wall that's referenced in the Flynn movie. They have a meeting. Susan Rice, another one. They have a meeting. And in that meeting, they're like, it looks like they're closing Crossfire Hurricane because there's nothing, they couldn't find anything.
Right.
So then they're like, oh crap, we have to come up with something new.
Wait, you mean
to Crossfire Razor? Take out General Flynn.
You mean Crossfire Razor, right?
Crossfire Razor, sorry.
Okay. So then they need a new excuse to continue.
They need a new excuse to go after General Flynn because he's going to come in and be the national security advisor. And all of them are use the preferred expletive. They're screwed.
Yeah, they've probably committed crimes against the Constitution.
Yeah. So, and General Flynn would like a piece of that response.
Right.
And he's going to be in the one position that can create maximal consequences, accountability, and as I like to call it, retribution for that transgression. Couple that with General Flynn had indicated that he was going to look at every single presidential finding, covert action, the black budget. and who was involved and what corruption was involved in it, which would implicate all of the previous CIA directors and all presidents previously in any wrongdoings. Okay.
Okay.
So he was a big threat to both sides of the aisle. So January 5th rolls around. So Joe Biden comes up with the idea, what about this Logan Act thing? Can we go after him for the Logan Act? Because, well, let's just kind of take a look. So what do? They look at General Flynn's Flynn Intel Group, the company that he created after he gets out of the military. And then they look at his General Flynn's son, Michael Flynn Jr., and his business partner. I'll remember his name. And so they look at those three corporate directors of Flynn Intel Group, and then they're like, oh, wait, one of the deals that he did was with a Turkish businessman. And although he filed the necessary lobbying forms, let's go after him for not filing a Foreign Agent Registration Act filing.
This is
Meanwhile,
is this Michael Flynn Jr.?
For all three of them.
Okay.
And so when you look at the rules, a FARA is required if you're doing any business or work on behalf of a foreign government. Okay. Well, that wasn't the case. He was doing a support role for a businessman. So the filing wasn't required. So then they're like, hey, if you want us to file, we'll file. And they decided to use the number one FARA filing experts in DC. And they're like, okay, so if you're an executive and you're like, hey, I'm going to hire the best renowned lawyer on a particular subject, it should be taken care of, right?
Right.
But no, because one of the partners at that law firm, it turns out, is Eric Holder, the first AG for Barry Hussein.
Right.
And so they open up this FARA thing with, like, there's nothing there. But then they use that to say, hey, we're going to come after you. But before they do that, I shouldn't say before. As the predicate for that starts on January 5th, they then redeploy the FBI agents Joe Pientka and Peter Strzok with the notes as listed by Bill Priestap. Are we to get him fired or to get him to lie on January 24th of 2017 as those two agents are sent over to interview and question General Flynn? And this is based on Jimmy Comey's statement before a journalist in front of a crowd. And this is a lot of this is in the movie, Flynn Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost.
Right.
These snippets. So they send the two agents, and the agents ask General Flynn about his communications with the Russian ambassador. Okay. And he responds, and the agents are supposed to write what's known as FD 302. It's a form that combines the notes and the recollection of the meeting that the agent has with the target of the investigation. And it's supposed to be completed within 5 days of the interview. Fast forward 5 days. Nothing. And so fast forward, 7 years, and that original FD 302, just like the Woods file, is nowhere to be seen or heard. Why? Because the FBI is covering for it. Why? Because Joseph Pientka III, the junior agent in the tag team duo of Peter Strzok and Joseph Pientka III, Joe Pientka was the one that wrote the FD 302. And in that, if the original FD 302 matches with his testimony before Congress, that means the original 302 said that he did not believe General Flynn was lying or gave any indications of misrepresenting anything. Now you see why it's Joseph Pientka Awareness Month and how he can be the mother of all whistleblowers, Mr. Beckman?
Yeah. So he originally wrote a file that said after the meeting with General Flynn, essentially he trusted Flynn. but then you're saying later the document was changed to suggest that he did not trust Flynn?
Absolutely. No,
Okay.
no, no, not him trusting Flynn. He removed himself off of the Crossfire Hurricane. So Pientka believed Flynn.
Yeah.
But then when that took place, that means that there's no predicate, right? It just so
Right. It makes
they investigated him for Crossfire Razor, nothing. They investigated him again, nothing. So what are they going to do next to try to take out General Flynn? Enter in a couple of new names.
Okay.
Let's go back up to the top.
Okay.
One of the employees of Peter Strzok is a Russia analyst by the name of Catherine Seaman.
Catherine Seaman.
It's like Hollywood names over here, right?
Spelled as I would imagine.
Yes.
Okay.
So with the C, Catherine with the C.
Oh, okay.
And then SEAM.
Oh, okay.
SEA.
Got it. So she works for Peter Strzok.
Seaman. So SEAMAN.
Got it.
Okay, so Catherine Seaman, when you dig a little further, you find out that she is married.
Okay.
And her husband's name is, write it down, Joshua Pitcock.
Okay. Like that? Pitcock? Okay. Okay, so
yes, these are the names.
Okay.
And then you find out that, what does Joshua Pitcock do for a living? Considering his wife worked for Peter Strzok as a Russia analyst, perpetuating the Russia for Peter Strzok and the FBI. Well, Joshua Pitcock so happens to be at this time the chief of staff for, wait for it, drum roll, please, Mike Pence.
Wow. Okay.
Bam. So let's pause here because this is important.
Okay.
From an insider's perspective. So Joshua Pitcock is working for one of the statutory members of the National Security Council. Okay.
Right.
Because the vice president is one of the statutory members of the body known as the National Security Council, thus having access to the highest level national security and intelligence information. I would suspect that Josh Pitcock has the same level of clearance as the principal that he supports, right?
Right, Mike Pence.
And what about Catherine Seaman? Does she probably have similar clearance as PD Pablo Strzok when she's working the Russia?
Maybe. I guess I don't know.
I would say almost certainly.
Okay.
Now let's kind of agree on a few assumptions here. Would it be a fair assumption to say that Catherine Seaman talks to her husband, Josh Pitcock?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they gossip about this stuff at night.
Okay. Would it be a fair assumption that considering both are not only husband and wife, but also have the highest level clearance that our government gives in the executive branch, they feel comfortable without violating really any sort of norms or principles to disclose what they're working on?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. I would make that assumption myself. Now let's create the next level of assumption. Do you think that the chief of staff, Josh Pitcock, communicates with his boss, Mike Pence?
Yes, for sure.
And do you think that he communicates to his boss, Mike Pence, of which both have the same level of clearance, the conversations and context and information that his wife provides him to Mike Pence?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess it would depend on his ethics, but I don't trust their ethics. So I would say he probably conveys everything that his wife tells him.
Would it be a possibility, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Is it more than possible? Like if you were to kind of assess it, I would say that it is much more than even chance that those conversations took place.
Yeah, probably.
Would that be fair? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So since we agree on that point, it begs the question. How much of a role did Mike Pence play with his chief of staff, Josh Pitcock, and Josh's wife, Catherine Seaman, in Peter Strzok's and enter a new name, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, their effort in conducting the 25th Amendment removal of President Trump discussion. As soon as Trump removed Jim Comey as the FBI director.
So you're saying Peter Strzok and Rod Rosenstein in the FBI were having conversations about removing Trump, and there's a possibility that Mike Pence was influencing those conversations through his chief of staff, who communicates with their spouse, who's connected to Peter Strzok. Did I get that right? That's a lot.
Yeah, that's something to look into, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So how do we look into it? We look at the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, right, wherein she says, hey, we can talk to Katie, meaning Catherine Seaman, about the insurance policy.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Ooh. So what insurance policy are you referring to, Lisa Lee and Petey Pablo and Catherine C? Or excuse me, S? Ha ha ha. Inquiring minds want to know, Mike Pence, as you are placed under oath with your chief of staff and his wife when we get to a trial in the General Flynn lawsuit against y'all.
Oh, that'd be
we're waiting on the judge to allow us to move forward.
So there is an active lawsuit about this that may eventually cause some of this stuff to come out into the public.
Ooh, yes, there is.
Okay, that sounds very interesting.
Okay. So let's go back to General Flynn.
Okay.
So the original FD 302 that was truthfully written by Pientka is basically silenced out. And it wasn't until they were able to throw out General Flynn, meaning getting the prong of getting him fired, because Mike Pence fired him, by the way. How do I know this? Mike Pence's attorney, as we were talking at Trump International Hotel years ago, explained to me and a couple other folks that the most adamant he'd seen Mike Pence about anything advising President Trump was when he was advocating for the firing and removal of General Flynn. Huh, that is interesting. So, now that they've removed General Flynn, they still have to remove him from being able to advise President Trump, right? Get him fired or to get him to lie. How about they actually went for gusto, went for both, and then some? So how do you get it so that it sounds like he lies? Well, you have to change the FD 302 form.
Right.
That's where you enter in Andy McCabe's lawyer, Lisa Page, to work with her friend, Pete Strzok, to start to change the text of that original FD 302 into something that says General Flynn is lying.
So is there evidence for that they actually changed the text? They actually fraudulently created a new FD 302?
The evidence to support that is consistent with that conclusion are the text messages between Lisa and Pete talking about changing the text of the 302.
So there's actually text messages talking about changing the text of the FD 302.
Yes. Okay. And if you were to gain access to a system called the Sentinel system, you should be able to see every keystroke that took place from the original FD 302 to each change, date, timestamp, and maybe IP address in which user recommended and actually actioned those changes.
So you're saying the changes in these official governmental forms are actually logged, and somebody can go in and look at those.
Yeah, but they are doing everything in their power to stop that from being released, to include raiding Mar-a-Lago so that they can re-seize the evidence that was declassified, showcasing the entire Crossfire Hurricane op, of which they stole from President Trump that he was going to use in the RICO lawsuit against these very individuals. And General Flynn was going to use that same evidence in his civil lawsuit against these individuals.
Right. So is there any way to get these files? Like how does one go about getting them?
One way is to retake control of the executive branch.
Okay.
And so, which begs the question. This is why they're willing to do anything and everything to stop Trump from coming back into office.
Because they're going to go to jail because they're actually
because all of them are going to face retribution to the maximum level. And if I have any say in it, I will be live streaming it from start to finish, from the actual physical arrest, of which I will volunteer to be deputized for while I wear 50 GoPros on my body, live streaming it. And I will be live streaming, participating in deciding which state will conduct the capital punishment on these individuals.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So essentially, like to summarize here, there's a ton of evidence that people in the government in multiple different organizations are creating fraudulent files to spike investigations against.
Now, we've only really discussed the FBI and a little bit of the CIA's role.
Right. I have some other questions about, some of these other government organizations.
We're only on 3. You want to hit Paul Manafort real quick?
Yeah, for completion, we should. Okay.
Yeah, just to complete it. Yeah, we're going to cover all. I think this will be, I'm going to have to postpone all these other interviews because this one's, you got time?
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing to do, so I'm good for the rest of the day.
In that case, let me.
If this is helpful, I'm happy to be a help.
Hey, cancel all of my, or postpone all of my remaining interviews until I tell you otherwise. Okay. So, yes, this is good. So, Paul Manafort. Now, this is just by speculation based on all of the other observations that I've made. So, in 2014, as I'm sitting on the Ukraine crisis team in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center as an analyst,
right,
and providing my perspective of what's going on in Crimea, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in eastern Ukraine, right?
Right.
I see that, and even before that, good old Johnny Boy Brennan, the CIA director, travels over to Ukraine.
Right.
Oh, by the way, everything that I discuss is not related specifically to my time on the Ukraine crisis team. That's just context. In my free time as personal private citizen, Ivan Raiklin, that's what I publicly disclose. Okay.
Okay.
Got to give that disclaimer. So, Johnny Boy Brennan travels, as I observe it, on Russian media because you introduced me as I speak Russian. I read and understand Ukrainian. And so that helps inform me on the English, Ukrainian, and Russian language sources.
Right.
So as I'm observing, the Russian media talks about how Johnny Boy Brennan travels to Ukraine and facilitates what many see as the financial post bribe for a successful coup that just occurred in the Maidan and all that other stuff.
Right. I've heard about that.
So Petro Poroshenko is patted on the back. Good job. You're now going to be our lackey in Ukraine. And Vicky Nuland will help facilitate some of that stuff. But anyway, that's another thing. And what's her name? Fiona Hill is going to be also involved in the conversation as we lead forward, as we bring in whistleblower evidentiary hearings before the House committees. And we'll bring in the one of the twin Vindman traitor brothers, if I may say so, Fiona Hill. Anyway, I digress. So with the Ukraine stuff,
yes,
as I'm observing, and in my private capacity, Brennan travels over there. Then he tees up failed Vice President Joseph Robinette Biden-Linsky, right? And so what does Biden do when he travels to Ukraine, to Kiev, as he's there before the Verkhovna Rada, which is their parliament?
Right.
Well, he talks to Poroshenko and says, hey, I got a deal for you. Barry Hussein just authorized good old Biden to go ahead and do what? We're going to develop your economy. And I'm the point man, he says, for Ukraine, for Barry Hussein. How about this? We won't talk about the 10% for the big guy yet, but here's the deal. I have a guy that's going to help you develop your natural gas and oil and kind of natural resources sector in unconventional ways. This guy is so fantastic. He's the smartest guy I know, Petro, and his left nostril can sniff out oil fields.
Hunter Biden.
And his right nostril has the keen ability to sniff out natural gas fields to develop one of your largest natural gas company with his right nostril. Okay.
Right.
That guy so happens to be my crack baby, cocaine addict son, Hunter. Have I got the deal for you? All we ask for is you provide him $1 million a year for his hookers and blow, and he will be on the board of Burisma. And one other stipulation. If you want $1 billion, what's 10% of $1 billion?
Well, to calculate
100 million, right?
100 million. Okay.
Okay. 10% for the big guy, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
So if $1 billion, and I'm just speculating here, 10% for the big guy and extrapolating it from the other deals that were done that Tony Bobulinski shared with his testimony before Congress, as well as when he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. So anyhow, so remember that whole discussion? Hey, if you're not going to fire the prosecutor general that's investigating Burisma, of which my son is about to be the board member, then you're not going to get the $1 billion, Petro.
Right.
So then what does Petro do? He fires the prosecutor general from investigating Burisma, and that's the ROI that Burisma got for paying for Hunter Biden's hookers and blow to the tune of $8 million divided by 12. What is that every month? You can do the math.
Don't make me do it.
80-something thousand dollars repeating.
Okay, so but how does this connect to Paul Manafort?
That's exactly what it connects to. So now you know the context of Ukraine and Biden's business deals in Ukraine.
Right.
Is it possible that Paul Manafort's dealings in Ukraine gave him an insight to be able to disclose what I just explained to you way early as he was the campaign chairman in 2016 for President Trump, and then could have used that in later investigations because of his relationships and ties with key individuals in Ukraine's on legitimate business deals that Paul Manafort that was involved in. Basically, was Paul Manafort getting too close, and were his hands in the same pot that the Biden criminal syndicate wanted full unilateral and monopolistic authority over? My speculative, educated guess would lead me to believe that that is a hypothesis well worthy of investigating to see if there's any evidence that is inconsistent with it.
Right.
I haven't seen any, but it requires further investigations to see whether that rings true or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So one final question is, I can't remember, what did Paul Manafort actually get convicted for? Because he actually served in prison. What was the conviction?
FARA violations.
And can you explain that real quick?
Foreign Agent Registration Act violation.
Oh, I see.
Meaning, if you're working with the foreign government, you have to file through the Foreign Agent Registration with the DOJ, National Security Division.
Right.
So that American government knows that you are receiving money from a foreign government, and they are then in a position to monitor whether or not that's a legitimate, meets all national security and legal requirements. Oh man, how much do you want to go? We can go 10 hours in this thing.
No, so essentially, let me just try to summarize. So essentially, like, there's a ton of corruption in Ukraine. and it's probably the Bidens, Brennan, and this agent Nina Yankowicz is involved in this corruption. And it's possible that Paul Manafort knew a little bit about this corruption, and so they needed to get him. That's the speculation. Is that correct?
The speculation is that they needed to remove Paul Manafort for two reasons. He was the, campaign chair and a close ally advisor to President Trump, and they needed, like with all these people, they needed to remove him and them from the Trump orbit. Now that President Trump was elected, the uniparty cabal, in order for them to be able to handle.
Wait, your mic went out. Your mic went out. I can't hear you. We're just wrapping up. These are the four individuals.
Just this segment we're wrapping up.
Yeah. These are the four individuals that were targeted by Crossfire Hurricane, mostly under fraudulent justifications. And much of this details the connections and
with the political objective of taking out those individuals within the Trump orbit that could then advocate to have him go after the criminal actors that are in government.
I shall meet death head on. Decade, you've got to get out of here. Beware foul demons and beasts. There are many foes here. The time has come to cleanse my homeland. This monastery reeks with evil and corruption. I hate staining my hands with the blood of foul sorcerers. Eternal suffering would be too great for you, Diablo. Let the gate